Human beings are notoriously bad at making decisions. In some situations, we can create a flowchart or a checklist. In complex situations, there are many possible decisions, and somehow we have to come up with an answer. Use your judgment, we say. Use your professional judgment. So we make a decision based on what we know. Usually there's a delay before we know the outcome of the decision, so we don't know whether it has had the desired effect. We can make fast decisions with our hearts, and we can make slow decisions with our heads. How much we engage our heads varies from person to person. Whether there's anything in our heads to engage with is another question altogether. Then there are at least 20 biases in which our personal views affect our judgment. Things like anchoring bias and optimism bias. If we know what these biases are, we can compensate for them. Even if we're not influenced by our own biases, we're often influenced by other people. We've all heard of groupthink. What are the decisions that require professional judgment? The ones where there isn't an obvious right or wrong, so it's uncertainty. Yep, you don't know what you don't know. It's very easy 12 months after a decision has been made to think, yes, I should have made a different decision, but you have to work with the information you have at the time. Yes, that's why it isn't helpful to think of professional judgment in terms of right or wrong decisions. It's more useful to ask whether our peers would make the same decision with the same information. What is professional judgment? Judgment is related to expertise. Research suggests there are two kinds of expert. The kind that knows everything, remembers it, and can apply it. They make decisions with their heads. And the kind of expert that has the ability to make novel connections between things. A more intuitive kind of decision-making, with their hearts. That's pretty important when you don't have all the information you need to make a decision with your head. I think there's an ethical dimension too. I know when my judgment is being tested. When I feel uncomfortable about the way things are going, you feel it down here somewhere. That's when I know it's a judgment matter. My mother has a rare medical condition. As various symptoms emerged, she saw different NHS specialists. None made the correct diagnosis. Then she had a problem with her eyes and went to eye casualty. After about half an hour, the eye doctor started asking whether she had any shoulder or neck pain, which she did, but she was in eye casualty, so hadn't thought to mention it. The eye specialist had made these novel connections, and my mother finally found out what was wrong. But it's not just about the individual specialists, it's also about the way their work is organised. Specialists can be too specialised to see the whole situation. The influence of the organisation is recognised in thinking about what makes work a profession. Attempts in the 1950s to define a profession focused on making lists of characteristics, a body of knowledge, a code of ethics, professional behaviour, an element of public service. This was widely criticised for being too simplistic, so attention turned to the organisations professionals work for. How can professionals maintain their integrity and authority when they're being told what to do? How can they maintain and develop their knowledge and professional judgment when their days are spent measuring the time they spend with clients? Current research into professions has adopted an ecological perspective, studying the complex interactions between professionals, professional associations, employers, universities and other social institutions. If an organisation employs professional people, it has to behave in a way that encourages them to be professional. The key word here is autonomy. If people work in situations where everything they do is tightly controlled, they're not going to develop professional judgment because they don't get an opportunity to practice it. If you allow people to use their professional judgment, then there's a risk they'll make the wrong decision. De-risking is becoming widespread. My brother's an aircraft engineer, and when he's about to mend a plane, he has to go to textbooks and read the manual first and tick a box to say he's done that. Is he a professional, or is he just a monkey following some instructions? How do you know the textbook is the best way to do something? Most people think if you don't follow the process, it's not safe. There needs to be an element of caution, but if you can find a way to do something better, it's down to autonomy again, using your professional judgment to make something better. Following the process might be the route to failure, but that's okay, you've still followed the process. Apart from the risk to the organisation, the professional needs to take accountability. In project management, am I in a culture where I'll get the sack if I make a wrong decision? How do people new to project management develop their professional judgment? You're never going to be able to work on whacking great projects until you've been through the motions on smaller ones. To get away from gut reactions, biases and bad judgment, we can introduce bits of process. A project prioritisation process to help us decide where we're going to spend all our thousands of pounds over the next year. We can introduce checklists and key questions. We can assess risks and decide on the size or level of governance too. In a business case for an IT project, we can work out the time and cost, then multiply the time by 2 and the cost by 1.5. Everyone has an optimism bias. Part of the challenge of project management is the business environment. We can go through the planning process. This is how long it'll take, this is how much it'll cost. Then you're told we can't afford it. Cut it in half. Yes, some biases are more difficult to address than others. Take the anchoring bias. At the very beginning of a project, we have to put some numbers in the proposal. It doesn't matter how much thought we apply to the numbers later on. The executive and sponsor often take us back to those first numbers. Evidence-based management is supposed to drive out biases by driving out humanity and diversity. Whether you think this is a good thing or not, evidence-based management doesn't always work. It's supposed to involve evaluating all the available information and data. But people make judgments about what information and data is relevant and ignore the rest. Would we be better off embracing that humanity and diversity rather than trying to drive it out? Project managers need professional judgment on a daily basis. Even at the most simplistic level, we never have time to do everything the textbook tells us to do. So we have to decide how to spend our time so we can add value. How do we develop this professional judgment? Other professions actually teach people how to develop good professional judgment. Shouldn't we be looking at the nature of project managers? Some people should be encouraged not to enter the profession because they're not self-aware. What do we want project managers to be like? If you've got a level of self-awareness, you're not a project monkey, you're a project manager, you're a professional, you understand when there's a judgment to be made. Yes, and part of good professional judgment is knowing the limits of your own judgment. One perception of project managers is that they're kind of structured and administrative. They follow processes, get things organised. Actually, we want project managers to think outside the box and create solutions that are new and innovative. You have to be a bit of both. You can't be both. People just aren't like that. Some people are. Maybe we actually want more creative types who will fight against project management processes all the way. People who want to work in project management should be spending their time doing a psychology course rather than a Prince 2 course. If professional judgment is about decision making, it's about communication, negotiation, conflict, influencing, people stuff. We don't encourage people to do training in that because there's no little box, no certificate. But everyone in project management knows that the people bit is the most important bit. Why aren't we spending time and effort developing these kinds of skills that will help us make decisions better and make for professional judgment? It doesn't fit the underlying philosophy that things are predictable. In management education, we require students to reflect on their experiences. They get a lot of marks for reflection. Reflection can be taught. We don't do that in project management training. It's used in other professions, this concept of a reflective practitioner. How does professional judgment work as a competency? Competencies have different levels. How do you stick professional judgment into a box? Are you saying it's not a good idea because it's not easy to measure? No, I'm just trying to understand how you could do it. It would require a meaningful definition of professional judgment and some indicators. One might be ability to reflect. There are models of reflection that provide criteria for measurement. We're left with the question, how do we help project managers develop professional judgment? Is it a competency we should support? Is it something organisations should take accountability for developing? Or is it something we, as professionals, should be working on individually? Here are a few ideas. First is the drive towards certification training, telling people what's in the textbook, following a defined syllabus. It's useful to understand processes and current thinking, but people learn more if they discuss ideas. Second is reflection and critical thinking. Reflecting on the decisions we're making and the processes we're going through, thinking about what's good, bad and indifferent. Third is keeping a project diary, a personal journal about our professional judgment, decisions we've made, outcomes, and, for future decisions, what we've learned. Just because we have experience doesn't mean we learn from it. Fourth is professional institutions. Could APM provide a more rounded definition of professionalism in the APM BOK? Could we have professional judgment as a competency? Then we could include development of professional judgment in the education and training of project managers. We could design courses to support the development of reflective practitioners. Other professions do it. And let's ditch multiple choice exams. The correct answer is based on one person's judgment. In certain circumstances, any of the optional answers might be right. And how can it possibly help people understand that judgment is involved in being professional? Finally, there are the organisations that employ project professionals. If organisations want people that work for them to have good professional judgment, they have to give them some degree of autonomy, and they have to give them the time and space for reflection so that they can practice and develop their professional judgment. If they don't, the organisations will end up with project monkeys. What do you think?